And we should be live. Let's double check here. We'll find out here in a second. This is Michael Pulowski here with Eric Dondero. We're doing our second show together. Actually, we are also debuting. How long has your new website been live?
About 3 or 4 days. So yeah, it is. We are debuting the website.
Yeah, so it is not, instead of Darwin Subspeciest, now it's just subspeciest.com, right?
Subspeciest.com and also socialdarwinist.com. I got both URLs.
Both domains?
Yeah, both domains. And I went ahead and switched from GoDaddy to Epic. Epic is connected with Gab, and it's the platform provider of the future, and I'm real happy with them. I was a little timid and a little scared when I switched. I knew it was going to be a big deal, and it has been a big deal. Learning WordPress, I got to be an expert on GoDaddy's platform.
Mm-hmm.
WordPress is a little difficult. It's not super easy, but I'm about 70 to 80% there now on WordPress. I still have some serious questions. But the problem is you don't know.
It looks pretty solid, I'll tell you that.
Thank you so much.
Not to say that your old site didn't look good, but this looks pretty good. So I just wanted to address real quick is we were supposed to do this yesterday. We are shooting to do these on Monday, but considering here in Chicago it's a whopping 0 degrees, and what would you say, a 70 for you yesterday in Texas?
Yeah, we had a perfect day. It was 74, 75 degrees, sunny. But today it dropped down. It got cold. Right now it's in the 40s, and it's going to get down to 37 tonight. So we're having a little cold spell. But by the end of the week, we'll be back up into the 70s. So I live on the Texas coast, south of Houston, and so it's not a tropical climate. It's kind of a subtropical climate. So plants can grow here that, believe it or not, that will not grow in Houston, which is about 50, 60 miles north of me. So it's a very special place because certain trees, palm trees, banana trees, papaya trees, I can grow them in my backyard. People who live in Houston can't.
You showed me on your last stream that you had some palm trees in your backyard. That you said that's a bit of a hobby of yours.
Oh yeah. I'm into landscaping, tropical landscaping. I've got tiki huts. I have a tiki bar, tiki music, retro tiki music, all that. So
that's cool.
That's what
I'd imagine your backyard's got to be a good bit of fun.
Oh man, can't get away from it. You got to go to work, 5 days a week. What can you do? But so anyway,
yeah, that was the other thing is, like, the last time you were on the show, we kind of just got right into racial realism and a few other things. I just want to give you a chance to kind of say what your background is, and obviously your website is about racial realism, a bit of anthropology, evolution, but give you a chance to just talk about yourself, so that, because I think we would like to do these every Monday, just get a little background to get going for future shows.
Excellent. Monday's good for me, weather permitting. Some things come up. Tuesday's good too. But let's shoot for Monday. Let's see. My background: U.S. Navy veteran, 4 years United States Navy, 1981 through 85. During the height of the Cold War, I was out to sea all 4 years. 2 ships: the USS Kitty Hawk, which is an aircraft carrier, and the USS Luce, DDG-38, which is a guided missile destroyer. I spent a lot of time in the Persian Gulf, in the upper Persian Gulf, during the height of the Iran-Iraq War. Most people don't remember that one. Over 1 million people were killed, and our assignment was to escort the burned out oil tankers out of the upper Persian Gulf that Saddam was bombing, and escort them out into the Gulf of Aden. So I was in the Navy for 4 years. Got out in 85, went to Florida State University, got my BA in political science. Libertarian, Right when I got out of the Navy.
I've got your site administrator bio pulled up right now. So
yeah.
just so you know what's on screen.
So so right when I got out of the Navy, I joined the Libertarian Party, got super active in Florida, in Jacksonville, and went up the ranks in the Libertarian Party rather quickly. Got elected to the Libertarian National Committee. I was actually a committeeman.
You never told me that. That's awesome.
22 years old. I'm on the Libertarian National Committee.
Oh, jeez.
So that was cool. And then, Ron Paul was talking about running for president at the time. Believe it or not, some people were talking about recruiting Donald Trump to run for president as a libertarian in 1987.
I had heard whispers of that, but I'd say you're more of a reliable source to get that from.
Yeah, well, I was part of that movement. We're trying to attract a celebrity person to run for the Libertarian Party president.
Right. Well, Ron Paul was a strong one, but Donald Trump definitely would have turned some heads also. Ron Paul was my first presidential vote, actually.
But Ron Paul started making some noises. He had attended some Libertarian Party conventions in the past, and he always had a reputation in Congress as being like the most libertarian member. So he started palling around with the Libertarian Party, and I got to know him. He came to Florida.
You personally got to know Ron Paul?
Yeah, well, then he hired me.
That's cool.
And I ended up being his personal aide for about 14 months in the Libertarian presidential campaign. We traveled all the way from Fairbanks, Alaska, to Key West, Florida, campaigning. From San Diego to Maine. Ron and I campaigned in like 44 states. He came in third, got about 500,000 votes, which was much improved from the previous Libertarian presidential campaign, but it was kind of a downer. And after that, I said, you know what, this is just not working. I'm a Libertarian, but maybe the Republican Party's better. I joined the Republican Party, started a Libertarian caucus within the GOP. It was called the Republican Liberty Caucus, and was active with that. I was the executive.
I've heard of the Liberty Caucus before. Yeah, I didn't realize you were. Yeah, I've heard of the Liberty Caucus.
I founded it. I created it. That's in my living room.
Wow, that's crazy.
So it was
small world,
Tallahassee, Florida. And,
before we go any further, I'm personally curious because I know for me, and maybe speaking for another a group of libertarian friends of mine, Ron Paul's a bit of a messianic figure in libertarian circles, especially of my generation. Is there any insight you could?
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
yes, I can.
About the man.
Let me just finish the Ron Paul story.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just dying. I'm curious.
I can tell you everything you want to know about Ron Paul. I was his personal aide in the Libertarian race for 14 months. Then he started making noise about getting back in Congress. So he brought me out from Florida, brought me down here to Texas, and we started feeling around about the congressional race. And he hired me. I served as campaign coordinator. We won in 1996. We beat an incumbent who was a Democrat who switched to Republican. His name was Greg Laughlin. We beat him in the primary. Oddly enough, the general election ended up being more difficult than the primary. We thought we were done when we beat Greg Laughlin, the incumbent, but this guy named Lefty Morris, and that was his real name, Lefty Morris.
Lefty Morris,
from Austin. Yeah, a left-wing attorney from Austin put the fear of God into our campaign, and we barely won that general election. Ron won with 51%.
Wow.
So Lefty got 47%. So I went on to serve at Ron's district aide for about 6-7 years, all the way up to about 2003.
That's what I'm looking at your bio right here. Yep. You did a good job of kind of highlighting your timeline.
I opted to stay in the district. He said, "Do you want to come to Washington?" I said, no, I want to be here in the district. That way, what my role was, I was basically a glorified driver. Because Ron trusted me. He knew I was a really good driver. And every time he was in the district, we'd have to drive 4 or 5 hours to this event and that event. Sometimes Ron and I didn't get home till like 2:00 in the morning. And that's what I did for 6 years. I was with him every step of the way here in the district. the district stretched from Houston down to Corpus Christi all the way out to San Antonio. All that area in between was our congressional district. So, so what do you want to know about Ron Paul?
Well, I apologize. I keep turning my microphone off because of my location in downtown Chicago here. I'm trying not to blow out everyone's eardrums because it seems the L decides to really be working overtime whenever I have a live stream. So
most people want to know dirt about Ron.
No. I mean, well, first, I guess if you're opening the door, is there any dirt on Ron worth sharing?
Yes. And I'll break the news right. This is a super secret.
Okay.
I'm going to tell everybody.
You heard it here first.
Let the cat out. Break some news here.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Of course, Ron is an obstetrician gynecologist.
Mm-hmm.
He is very, very serious about his medical profession.
I've heard.
Every Monday, Ron would disappear. Nobody could get in touch with him. Not even his wife. Nobody for 8 hours. I was the one that, since I was in the district, I'd have to keep in touch with him. And once in a while, he'd send me a little message. You know, it was back in the 90s. So texting was new and stuff like that. He would just totally, every single Monday, you would not be able to get a hold of Ron Paul for about 8 hours. He would just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And I know where he was, at a very secret location. And I'm maybe one of 4 or 5 people besides his family members
who knew
where he went every single Monday.
Okay.
Now you're supposed to ask me where.
Well, I thought that's coming, but there's a train coming by too, so I was muting the microphone. So where'd he go?
He dedicates 8 hours a week to pro bono work. I guess that's what you call it for a medical physician, for a doctor. It's just like a lawyer. He dedicates 8 hours, sometimes 10 hours every Monday. Into an inner city hospital doing gynecology and obstetrician work, completely free, doesn't charge anything. He does this out of the goodness of his heart. You cannot get a hold of him. He will not be interrupted. If his house caught on fire and his wife called him up, he would not take the call. For 8 hours, he tells everybody, do not contact me. But we all knew.
I'd actually heard that as a rumor, but to hear that
did
from,
you hear that as a rumor?
I'd heard someone had told me that he did pro bono work as a doctor. But to me, it's something that I heard like back in 2009 or something like that, and I was like,
well, I can confirm it because I was his personal aide in the district, so I'm the one that was able to call him right at 5:30 in the late afternoon when he permitted me to. Okay, he said, Eric, nothing before 5:30, and then I call him 5:30 sharp, and I say, oh, Ron, we got to jump in the car. We've got to be in Austin in like 2 hours, so tell me where to meet you. I call him 5:30 sharp, and so anyway, that's his big secret.
That's funny. I mean, when I was expecting some skeletons in the closet, not
that's his big skeleton.
That's his big skeleton. So safe to say, he's as good of a guy as he appears to be. He's one of those few politicians who actually is a good guy.
Yeah, he's let me see if I had a. There really isn't.
Let's say, he's at the gates of St. Peter and you got to say something bad about him. What's the worst thing you could say about Ron Paul?
I can tell you that he has some physical difficulties. He has horrible knees. And he'll tell you this. He has to bike. I know this really sounds weird, but he has to bicycle like 20 miles a day just so his knees will continue to function. There were many times where I literally had to
help him around,
carry him out of the car.
Really?
Yeah. So he has some physical difficulties. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen him in 10 years. I wonder how his knees are now. They must be really bad.
Yeah, I don't think that's anything you hold over the guy, though. That's just kind of life doing his shit hand. So, yeah, let's
doesn't want everybody to know, but but if he's asked, he would tell you that. The other thing, let's see, he's geeky. He's really, really geeky.
Ah, man. Geeky people are my kind of people. They normally have interesting stuff to say.
He does not like people with. I don't want to say he doesn't like them.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't like to be around people that have lower IQs as much as people who were into topics like economics and.
Well, yeah.
Well,
he can do it. He's a very intelligent guy. Why would there's an expression. It's like, would you rather be the smartest person in a room full of dumb people, or would you rather be the dumbest person in the room full of smart people?
He's very good at. I don't want to say faking it, but he's very good at glad handling and getting down with regular folks. But he'd much rather be in an economics conference discussing Austrian economics and the gold standard fiat currency with Lou Rockwell and all that. That's.
I don't blame I don't blame him, especially in his twilight years. Why would you want to waste your time? I'd want to be on the cusp of what's being talked about more than rehashing stuff you've already gone over. If I was in his shoes.
That's about it. The other thing is he's real nitpicky about. Oh yeah, okay. I am going to say something bad about Ron Paul.
Okay.
He is extremely nitpicky. About little things like, and this is not a bad one. I mean, he really wants to be absolutely punctual.
Well, that's a good thing to be nitpicky about.
Oh my God, he's obsessed with it. And he does not like to be early to a function either. So here I am. I'm having to make sure that we arrive in Smithville, Texas, at the conference center or the church at precisely 1 minute before 5 o'clock when the event starts.
So you're circling on the block with him a little bit, or?
Yeah, we would get there like 10 minutes before, and I said, well, and he'd sit in the car. I said, Ron, come on, let's. He said, no, drive around the block a couple times. And I was like, you got to be kidding me! It's no crime to be
a little early. Yeah.
And God help you if you're late.
Oh no.
He fired me at least twice a week. He would yell and scream at me and say, Eric, you're fired. And I'm like, damn. I knew it was coming. And then, after the event was over, he tossed me the keys. And I said, what are you doing? You just fired me. He said, come on, we got to get back to
we got to get back to work. That's funny. I'm sure he's a fun guy to be around and learn from.
He grumbled in the car and, he wouldn't talk to me the whole way home for 3 hours. That's how I knew he was pissed off at me. So, but I was the best person at getting him at events precisely on time. And he did not want anybody else to drive him around. He hated driving with other people. And I knew his little intricacies, like the business report would come on every half hour. And we'd be in the middle of a sentence and the business report would come on and I'd shut up because he would tune into that and he wanted to know every little detail about the Dow Jones and the gold prices for the day. But other people in the car wouldn't know this. So they continued talking and chatting and it would irritate him. And but
I'm sure that's why he kept you around. But yeah, why don't we digress a little bit from Ron Paul? Maybe I know personally this is all new information to me. I love hearing it, but we can table that for another discussion, especially if that's what people want to hear. Yeah, I do want to take a minute. We have a couple people watching that if you do want to chime in at any point, ask a question for Eric or maybe guide the conversation in a certain direction, feel free to chime in. But why don't we talk about your background as far as being a world traveler, your multilingual background. Just really give yourself a bit of a vote of confidence why we should be listening to your anthropology background, given all the places you've been and all the different languages you learned from.
Yeah, well, of course, in the Navy, I traveled all over the world. I saw did the East Coast, the West Coast. I've been about 25 countries on all 5 continents. I backpack across Southern Europe. I got out. I resigned from Ron Paul in about 2003, and I went off and tried being an interpreter in Spanish. I wasn't that great. I wasn't that as good as I could be. So I decided, you know what? I want to be totally fluent in Spanish. I was maybe about 80%, which is good for a white boy, but I wasn't good enough to be an interpreter.
Tú hablas español muy bueno.
Yeah, well, gracias. Entonces no vamos a hablar de eso en pocos minutos. Entonces, era maestro de inglés. I want to be a teacher, an English teacher down in Tampico, Mexico for 3 months. That put me over the top.
There you go.
Put me over the top in speaking Spanish at an advanced level.
Like, you got to dive in to learn a language.
¿Cómo está usted, señor? ¿Todo está bien contigo?
Well, you know, it's a joke my father always says is he says the easiest way to learn a foreign language is to fall head over heels for a woman who doesn't speak a lick of English, because that's what happened to him. He did not know a word of Spanish before he met my mother. It's the strongest motivator to learn another language.
Well, that was back in the day when you could still go to Mexico and be safe.
Yeah, that's true.
So I had plenty of Mexican girlfriends, and aprendí todo mi español en Tampico, y ahora puedo hablar como mexicano si quiero, un acento auténtico como vamos por la troca, tomar muchas cervezas, vámonos, you know. And,
suenas más mexicano que yo.
Tú hablas como venezolano.
Como venezolano, ¿sí? Claro, porque muchos de la gente que hablo son maracuchos.
Entonces,
we're speaking Spanish, so people probably listening in English, so we should probably switch back. But it's nice being able to speak with somebody who is also bilingual. I mean, you're more than I am. I mean, je parle français un petit peu. That's about it.
Yeah, yes, I mastered the Spanish. I got back and I said to myself, I'm half Italian. I might as well pick up Italian too. Entonces, posso parlare molto di italiano, è molto facile per me. Io ho visitato Italia 2 volte. And it's very similar to Spanish.
Very similar.
So
yeah.
I spent like years, and I finally got totally fluent in Italian. And I said, I might as well get the whole set. And I started studying Portuguese and French. And je parle beaucoup le français. C'est très facile pour moi. Vous comprenez très bien. J'ai visité en France 2 fois. So I got fluent in French and Portuguese. Eu posso falar muito de português. Você entende de português é muito similar a espanhol, più or meno. So it's all mixed up in my head.
Right. I'm sure they bleed over into each other sometimes, all those Romance languages.
Yeah. They do. Especially the Italian and the Spanish. So I think the chemistry in my brain changed fundamentally.
I would imagine so. Yeah. It's the way you organize your thoughts.
I just became a sponge, and I was all of a sudden I was able to pick up languages like, boom, 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 boom. Now I speak German, I speak Russian, I can speak Romanian, Filipino, and Japanese. And I'm most proud of my Chinese. 我会说一点中文，你明白吗？我会说一点中文。So I'm probably about mid-level Chinese. 我的太太她从天津啦，你明白吗？ So I speak Chinese, and we'll get off the language topic in a second. But
no, I think the language thing is very important. That's something I want to get into. Just a little bit. I wanted to get that background because I really, one of the topics I believe, and more on my psychology side of things, is that I do believe language to be a construct of how you organize thoughts in your brain. So it's more for a discussion we might have on another stream. I just wanted to be out there for maybe people watching this stream in a succession for the next one to know that you have a background in languages better than I do in particular.
Yeah, well, and of course that's what led me into anthropology and paleontology.
Oh, they definitely piggyback off each other.
Yeah, and studying how the brain functions, because about halfway through learning all these languages, I started researching how the brain functions and how fast language learning. And that was back in the 2000s, 2005, 2006. And that was a big thing back then, brain power. Lots of books were written about fast learning and how you can master this and do that. And
I don't think it's gone away. I'll be honest with you. People are they're talking about nootropic drugs and all that. And all those. Yeah, it's still there. The industry's still there. I
got into ginkgo and ginseng, And I can tell you, I think the ginkgo really helped.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know about the ginseng, yeah, but the ginkgo really helped to clear my mind and allowed me to learn a lot more languages than I probably would have without it. So,
did you take a supplement for it? Or did you take a tea that had
just stuff that you buy at Walgreens or
really?
Walmart? Yeah, and I can't take it now. I cannot take it because my mind now operates like a bullet train, and
okay.
if I take ginkgo, I'm just it just expands it enormously where I can't even relax.
I've never tried ginkgo, so you just added something to my list. I'll put it that way. I've never heard anyone tell me ginkgo had that effect on them.
I have sworn off of ginkgo. I can't. Once you reach the point that I have, you can't take it. So,
you sound like some of the people, like some of the psychonauts I've listened to when they talk about like LSD and stuff. They're like, I can't go on. I can't use mushrooms anymore. I've gone too far. It's you and ginkgo and your language.
So I know we want to get on to other topics, but I just want to say about language.
Yes,
I am asked all the time, and let me spend a minute just rattling all of them off all together. Puedo hablar español como mexicano si quiero. Puedes entenderme bien. Era maestro de inglés en Tampico por 3 meses más o menos y vivo en Texas ahora, pero posso parlare molto italiano. Le capisci tutto quando parlo italiano. Mia famiglia vengono del centro d'Italia, di Toscana. Et je parle beaucoup le français. Vous comprenez très bien. Quand je parle le français, j'ai visité la France 2 fois. Eu falo muito de português, você entende? É muito similar a espanhol, più ou menos. Let's see. 我会说一点中文，你明白吗？Ja, понимаю, только немного по-русски. Вы понимаете по-русски. Ich habe eine Reise auf Deutschland. So, boom, that's it. Anyway,
that was 7 that I could count, and actually I realized I was holding a handout. I was holding a handout, and it wasn't even on the screen. So,
this is what I'm going to say. I'm asked all the time, how do you do it, and what languages should I learn, and how do you learn languages fast?
Mm-hmm.
First thing I'm going to say is that if you're an American, learn Spanish.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time on anything else.
Yeah.
Spanish is so easy. It's so similar to English. Once you learn how similar it is to English, it becomes you can. And here's the thing about Spanish: you can speak bad Spanish, and a Mexican doesn't care.
They don't. I was about to say that was what I was about to say. Mexicans don't care. The thing is,
they speak bad Spanish.
Colombians care. Colombians care.
But we deal with Mexicans here in Texas and here in the United States.
I'm just pointing out, my grandfather, he's a huge stickler in Spanish grammar. He's always correcting my Spanish. But he speaks Spanish very well. He's an eloquent man when it comes to language. So I think that was a good bit of background into you. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on? We got into your political service, your military service, your traveling, the languages. Something else you want to touch on?
One other point on languages.
Sure.
I'm always asked, what's the toughest language in the world to learn?
Okay.
Without a doubt, Vietnamese. Stay away from it.
Okay.
You can't even say fundamental stuff like hello or how are you without sounding awful, and they won't understand you.
Really?
Chinese is pretty difficult, but Vietnamese is insane.
Yeah.
And my final comment about languages is that everything you learn about, you've heard about French is true. It really is magical. It is an amazing, poetic language. And when I'm speaking it, I can't believe I'm speaking it. I'm like, wow, that sounds so cool. I'm half Italian, so when I speak Italian, I can feel it. I can feel it in my bones. I don't feel it when I'm speaking Spanish, even though I'm 100% fluent, like I do with Italian, But when I speak French, it's just amazing. It's an amazing feeling. And I would tell anybody that if you're going to try to learn French, go for it, because it really is a miraculous language to learn. You should do it. So, really is.
It is always really nice to hear French. I'll say that. It's just an aesthetically pleasing language, whether you understand what's being said or not.
Of all the language I speak, it is absolutely the most beautiful.
Maybe that's why they're always in wars and getting conquered throughout history.
Yeah. So that all got me into anthropology, and started studying paleontology and primatology, chimpanzees, because this all kind of intersected with linguistics and how the brain functions, and you start getting into topics like human evolutions, human origins. Where do we come from? And I just started getting into it more and more and more, and the last couple of years, it's just occupied all my time. And my main area of interest in anthropology and paleontology is bias. I can see how the academic community, how they're so left-wing, and they don't acknowledge anything that does not fit with their agenda.
Well, so I don't want to say they're all left-wing, because it's a very generalized thing to say. If they're not left-wing, they're at least afraid of the retribution of the people that are left-wing.
Yes.
Which is it's culpable by association. You know what I mean? It's guilty. There's a word for it. Guilty by silence of omission. You know, or I'm completely missing what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean. Is by not standing up, you're voting for the mob.
Yeah. So if you go to my site,
yes,
you go to my website, especially page 2.
Okay.
What I've done. And I've done this for the last year. I've made it a point. I've become such a geek on this topic. I listen to lectures over and over again by famous anthropologists and geneticists like Svante Pabo,
ethnic
Johannes
Europeans.
Krauss.
Yep.
Yeah, Dr. Lee Berger. He's an American. Dr. John Hawkes from the University of Wisconsin, and a whole host of Christopher Stringer from the museum up in London, the National Museum of England up in London. He's Donald Johanson, who discovered Lucy, Australopithecus, and the Leakeys, of course, Richard and his son Louis Leakey, Meave Leakey. And what I've done is I watch these lectures every single night, over and over and over again, and you mostly catch them in the Q&A part, where they slip up a bit. They're put on the spot, but because people want to know about racial differences, they want to know about race and IQ, and these guys don't want to talk about it. Steven Pinker does.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to point out, this is one thing we've discussed before in our last stream, is it's not that these people are doing it because they are looking to subvert or, I don't know, create controversy with other people. I assume most of them are doing it purely for the sake of following a rational path, looking for what the truth is, not, you know what I mean? I find that the opposition, as you're talking about the people on the left, that it's the ends being justified by the means. They're looking to say, well, what you're saying is wrong because I don't like it, and they're like, that's not the point. I'm bringing you facts, and then we can decide how it fits into the world narrative. And they'd prefer not to have it included. Is I think what the issue we're facing is. Is that sound about right?
Yeah, you're getting real close. I would say, firstly, these guys are geeky too. They're really into the science, and they hate politics. They really, really hate politics, and also a lot of funding is involved as well. The European anthropologists are all dependent on the EU and all these globalist institutions. So they have to toe the line. They have to be multicultural. They cannot be in any way denigrating to people who are not white. So you ask them about race and IQ, they kind of dodge it. But getting back to what I was saying before, you catch them in the Q&A. Sometimes they slip up, and about halfway through answering the questions, they realize they've slipped up, and they kind of backtrack a bit. But boom, I got them. I got it. If you go to page 2 on my website,
I'm on page 2 right now.
Yeah, you will see all sorts of quotes with links on these guys admitting racial differences.
Is there one in particular you'd want me to highlight? Because that was the one thing I was going to say is I've got your website pulled up. I've got a couple of sections. I've got the ethnic Europeans, the northern extremes. Is there anything you'd like to highlight that you know of?
Well, I'd say at the very bottom of page 2, I have multiple quotes.
The frequently asked questions, or no, even further down?
No, yeah, frequently asked questions all the way at the bottom.
I have, why does multi-regional model matter, or is the Stefan Molyneux?
Yep. I have all sorts of, I did this deliberately. I got like 5 or 6 celebrities. I mean, we know about Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? He's a science celebrity. Bill Nye, the science guy.
Science celebrity, well, not scientist, science celebrity.
Okay, yeah. Well, the anthropology, paleontology community has celebrities too. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as science celebrity, but I guess they're anthropology celebrities, and they give lectures and they have BBC specials. One in particular is Spencer Wells. He had Journey to Man on the PBS special a few years ago. Also, Dr. Alice Roberts, who's British, and she had a 4-part series on the BBC, which was pretty good. You'll see her photo on page 2 next to a Chinese guy who's Dr. Wu with the anthropology department in Beijing. But anyway, at the very bottom, you will see that I caught all these guys admitting, admitting, and I searched for these quotes. They are all admitting that Eve out of Africa is obsolete. Now, if people are not familiar with Eve out of Africa, that means the theory that 70,000 years ago we're all Somalians and we're all Ethiopians. That they made a big splash in about
somewhere between Lake Victoria and Egypt. Humankind spawned from that area is the thought.
Well, they were more specific than that.
Well, it was more specific. I was trying to get generalized stroke it for maybe because I know I'm following you. If I ever have a question, I'll ask. But once in a while, I like to take things back geographically. Just in case someone doesn't really know where Ethiopia, Somalia is, somewhere between the source of the Nile and Egypt. It's right in the middle there. I guess I could pull it up on my screen. But I'm just trying to make sure people can follow everything we're talking about because what you're saying is great.
Newsweek magazine, Time magazine, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, huge headlines, and I think it was 2008. We're all Africans, and we all come from the Horn of Africa, which is present-day Somalia and Eritrea, Ethiopia.
Djibouti.
They said we're descended from only a group of 10,000 Homo sapiens that survived all sorts of adverse conditions, and we had no admixture with any other human species at hominid species at that time. No, we absolutely came from these 10,000 people. They were convinced of it.
And you say you're talking about the scientific community at that time?
The anthropology community, backed up by the big media and backed up by all the academic institutions.
And the corporate interests that may be involved, also the financiers.
Yeah, it fits the narrative.
Right.
How can you say that white people have higher IQs or Asians have higher IQs when we're all Africans? Well, something happened in 2010.
Okay.
Something enormous happened in 2010. Are you familiar with this at all?
Go ahead.
Svante Pavo. He's got a difficult name to pronounce. He's Swedish. He's a geneticist.
Is this the Morocco? I'm just trying to follow on your webpage. Is this the Morocco discovery?
Morocco is partly responsible for this. But Svante is at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. His assistant, his name is Johannes Kraus. young guy,
Hmm.
millennial guy. I think he's in his 30s, and they were they they got the original Neanderthal skull, the one that Neanderthal is named after, this little tiny village in Neanderthal, Germany, and it was found in 1859, and they were analyzing the original skull that we've found hundreds of Neanderthal skulls since then. But they went with the original one that was found in 1859. They drilled a little tiny hole into it, and they researched the genome of all Neanderthals. And the story goes, Svante had just had a cup of tea. He was settling in for the night. It was 11 o'clock, and he had just pulled the covers over in his bed, and he got a phone call. And it was his assistant, Johannes Krauss. This is 2010. They were mapping the Neanderthal, the genome to see if there were any matches with modern Homo sapiens, us. And Johannes Krauss said to him, "You better get to the lab right now. We found a match."
Real quick, where on your website is this link? Because I want it to be on the screen while you're describing it. I wonder which section of your.
I don't really get into this whole the whole back Svante, but Svante's all over page 2. You can see him quoted all over the place.
Okay, I think I found it.
So he rushed to the lab. Sure enough, before, you got to understand, before 2010, it was all speculative. Do modern human beings have any Neanderthal DNA? And people were starting to get into Eve out of Africa. It was solidified. It was becoming the theory. If you weren't an Evist, you were not going to get any funding from any academic institution. But there was a small group of people, like one gentleman on the page 2, Millard Wolpoff, who's from the University of Michigan. You see him under the section of who are some of the leading proponents of multi-regional. Him and a famous anthropology professor down in Australia. His name was Thorne. They flew the flag high for multi-regional. They said, no, we have Neanderthal DNA, and some of us are originated from Homo erectus. The Chinese and the Russian anthropologists were all multi-regionals, and they stayed the entire time. But all Western anthropologists were totally into Eve out of Africa, and they didn't want to hear anything about multi-regional origins. Well, when they discovered the Neanderthal DNA within the human genome, Svante likes to say 2 to 4%. No, it's more like up to 7%. Okay. But he will say 2 to 4% of Europeans have Neanderthal DNA. When that was discovered, it changed everything. And
to the layman, how does that change everything? Because I'm following you. When you map it out, and it proves that Neanderthal DNA is still more of a part of our DNA than we were previously had assumed. Is that kind of the conclusion to make?
It means Europeans, white people, are fundamentally different. We have 6%. Some people even speculate if you go to isolated parts of Sardinia or mountain valleys in Australia and you do a DNA test on some rural folks, you might get a 7 to 8% DNA percentage. And I kind of go along with that. I believe that's true. And so, but I've seen it as high as 6% on the website for sure. Spencer Wells, who I've mentioned before, who's had the PBS documentary series Journey of Man. He's in Austin now, and he has a company that does it's like 23andMe test for Neanderthal DNA. He went ahead and found when this was all new in about 2012. He did this conference at the University of California in San Diego. This is a great story.
Okay.
And this is all brand new. Oh my God, we Europeans, white people actually have Neanderthal DNA. and he thought he'd put a couple people on the spot. And he took 3 people out of the audience and said, "Get up on the stage." And he gave them a little swab in the cheek, and he immediately tested their DNA percentage. The other 2 guys, typical 2%. One guy, his name is James Follows, and I remember him. He was a writer with the Wall Street Journal, also with the Atlantic magazine, and I have him linked on the website.
Okay.
He scored 5%.
And he was from where? You said he was.
His ancestry is Scottish. He's an American.
But he was 5% Neanderthal.
5% Neanderthal. So that's on record. That's on record. Somebody scored 5% Neanderthal, and I have the link on page 2 of my website. So anyway, what does this all mean? Why does this matter? We have to digress for a second and talk about the Asians. What do you suppose Asians are?
Well, only because we've spoken before. You told me the Denisovan line.
Correct. So, about 4 or 5 years after Svante discovered that Europeans had 3% Neanderthal DNA, in a cave in southern Siberia on the Mongolian border, some paleontologists, archaeologists discovered a tiny little pinky bone. And they went ahead and they did the genome mapping of it in the lab, and they found out, whoa, wait a second. This is not Neanderthal. They thought it was Neanderthal. This is not Homo sapien. And then they discovered 3 other teeth, and it matched the tiny pinky bone.
Yeah, I pulled up a map of the. It's a map showing Homo heidelbergensis going up the Nile through Turkey, through Greece, through Italy into Spain, and then it has a Neanderthal. You should be seeing an update here in a second. Going to Denisova Cave. Is this a good map? Yeah. It's just something I pulled up off the web.
So that meant that, and they went ahead and mapped the genome for Asians, and they discovered, oh my God, Chinese, Japanese, especially East Asians have Denisovan DNA. They also have Neanderthal DNA. So Asians have Denisovan DNA and Neanderthal DNA. And some would say, particularly the Chinese themselves, would say they have ancient lineage to Homo erectus. And I absolutely agree with that. But why does this matter? You've got Europeans with 5%, 4 or 5% Neanderthal DNA. You got Asians with Denisovan, Homo erectus, and Neanderthal DNA, all mixed. You have Africans, sub-Saharan Africans. That would be Congo. That would be Tanzania, Kenya, anything below the Sahara. Guinea-Bissau, they have
all the river
kingdoms. None of this. Yeah, they have no Neanderthal DNA. They have no Denisovan. Yep. So what you have then is confirmation, and you see it on the website on page 2 at the very bottom, that we have multi-regional origins. We did not all originate from Ethiopia or Somalia with 10,000 original people. We come from multiple different origins. We have the Homo sapiens that left Africa went ahead and mated with the Neanderthals who had been on the European continent for 600, 800,000 years. The Homo sapiens that left Africa went ahead and interbred with Denisovans and with Neanderthal and with existing Homo erectus in the Asian continent. That means we have fundamental differences in our body. We have fundamental differences in our brains. So now we get to the point where I really wanted to...
I just want to play devil's advocate for a second for you. Isn't this something that the leftists would want to hear? That there is more diversity?
No. They're all about kumbaya. We are the world.
That everything came from Africa.
Yep.
Humanity couldn't have come from Siberia. Humanity couldn't have come from...
We fundamentally know that's not true. The Chicago Bulls, what is it? Is there a single white guy on the Chicago Bulls? Seriously.
Actually, no. Yeah, seriously, one of their best players right now is a German, I believe. Markanian is his name.
Okay. I mean, down here in the Houston Rockets a few years ago, we had the big, tall Chinese guy. What was his name? I forget.
Markkanen, yeah. Yao Ming for the Houston Rockets.
Yao Ming,
yeah.
Yeah. Whatever happened to him? You don't hear much about him anymore. But so yeah, okay, they got one token white guy, one token Asian guy on every NBA team, and we as Americans, we fundamentally know this. We're different. You know what? Whites cannot.
I think the United States is a very interesting experiment as to a good mixture of different races. When I say races, coming from a different genetic template. And like you said, yeah, you can see that there's a predisposition for certain races to be more suited to different things. I think one thing a lot of leftists might throw at you is the cultural angle too, because you can't deny that certain cultures might have a different value system towards specific things, and I would have to concede that point a bit. That maybe the African American culture is more valuing of sports as to other ones, but to me that's more just muddying the water. That's just graying the playing field for the sake of, you're not going to get anywhere bringing up those points. I just wanted to make sure it's there.
You got to ask yourself, why is it that a white man has not won the Boston Marathon in over, I think it's 35 years?
Is that true?
Yes. It's been 100% Kenyans.
I was going to say, I've heard Kenyans are beasts when it comes to long distance running.
They can long distance run.
Like it's not even a black thing. It's like literally I heard Kenyans are just like people from Kenya in particular are tremendously good at running long distance.
You can be more specific than that. There's a genetic difference between East Africans and West Africans. They've done testing on NFL players, and running backs almost always have a genetic line from West Africa because they're good at sprinting. They're not so good at long distance running. But the West Africans, that genetic lineage helps with very quick spurts and quick running, very fast, whereas East Africans are very good at long distance running. So there's even differences within the African continent. So yeah, the leftists would come back and say, well, so if we just spent more money on it, well, why? Why do you want to do that? I mean, why don't you just acknowledge that we evolved differently? We were separated in 3 or 4 different continents for tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. Certainly we're going to develop different traits. And the fact that we have Neanderthal lineage for Europeans, we have Denisovan lineage and Neanderthal and Homo erectus for East Asians, why don't we go with that? Why don't we recognize that and celebrate the differences between modern Homo sapiens within modern humans, and stop trying to pretend we're all the same, because we're not. Now, this gets real dicey when you get into the IQ issue.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, just before we get into IQ, because that's obviously a point we wanted to get to, is what do we stand to lose by not admitting racial realism and clinging to as you said, the kumbaya, we are the world model? What do we stand to lose by not accepting what you and I are seeing to be, and many others, to be the reality of the situation?
Oh my God, the policy implications are enormous.
I know that's a broad stroke question, but I kind of feel like tying it back into daily life is the most important thing. When it's not
I'll give you an example, and it's highly controversial, but I like to use this example. As a libertarian, you'll probably appreciate this, but we spend $42,000 a year on little black kids in Washington, D.C., sending them to school annually, $42,000 per pupil. And they're all, 100% of them are on the track for college, for an academic career. gender studies or psychology or social studies or political science or something like that, and stuff that isn't as useful as other degrees. Well, why are we doing that when maybe their IQ level does not match an Asian kid's level? I mean, can we at least acknowledge that? Why are we spending $42,000 a year on some little inner city black kid who we all love and we all want to succeed? $42,000 a year is an awful lot of money to.
That's more than I paid for college.
Yeah, taxpayers.
And I went to that was more than I paid at the University of Cincinnati, one of the premier colleges, at least in my region. That $42,000 a year.
They're all trying to get into Ivy League schools. Why not say, you know what? Maybe you're not cut out for Ivy League schools, but we need these particular occupational skills.
Right.
Put them on a track, VOTEC or community college. That would be money much better.
Something more practical.
I mean,
I apologize. I got to keep muting because for some reason every other minute there's a train going by. This is odd.
So I mean, you can imagine how extremely controversial that is. To say that, you know what, maybe black kids aren't. There are exceptions, and when the exceptions come, we should do whatever we can to assist them and up the ladder and send them to an Ivy League.
I think the point you made is something that'd be there'd be too much emotion tied into it for, the moment you say inner city black kid, you've already demonized yourself. That's like pulling the pin off a grenade socially, It shouldn't necessarily be the case. You should at least be able to have a conversation about it. But
yeah, and this was gotten Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin and all these guys.
They've gotten a lot of trouble. Actually, I don't know if you can see it on your screen now. There's a tweet I pulled up from Stefan Molyneux that really struck me. He posted this on the 25th, so that was last Friday he posted this. You should be able to see it, but I'm going to read it out loud real quick and your take on it, because it's actually very apropos to a lot of what we've been discussing recently. He said, white privilege was 50,000 shivering winters while others in endless summers danced and sang and had easy eats year-round. East Asians had it even worse. Siberia, snow tigers, you fantasize about privilege. No, it was suffering. So pipe down, our ancestors earned it.
That was a great quote. That was about a week ago.
That was last Friday. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I imagined you would. I know you follow Molyneux. But when I read that, I was like, damn. If that's not kind of spot on, especially something to be saying in the middle of the wintertime when half the country is going through a pretty historic cold. But yeah, I think that's one thing to bring up too. Maybe not only the sources and the genetic makeup of some of these populations, but over time, the natural selection and the evolution that had to go underway that, if you are living in sub-Saharan Africa where the food is plentiful and you don't need to learn agriculture, if you don't need to learn how to trade and create currency and you know what I mean? If everything's readily available to you, you don't need to learn to create a civilization. It's like it's nothing personal.
Yeah, you had to plan ahead for the coming winter. White people, Europeans had to plan ahead.
Well, so did East Asians. East Asians did as well.
They also had to plan hunting trips.
They did.
They had to plan, harpoon fishing and in very extreme environments.
All those things require social hierarchies. They require, like you said, planning, which planning normally involves writing. All those things involve skills. Skills involve teaching. Division of labor becomes, a lot of these very simple early civilizational structures that simply are superfluous to civilizations that live in a very equatorial area. And I think having that conversation is a little maybe more easier to explain than the archaeological evidence. Not to say that the archaeological evidence, I'm just saying for the sake of argument, if you're trying to win this argument with a leftist, maybe I'm showing my youth, but I feel like making the argument of the social evolution side of things would be a little more receptive, at least to lead with, and then follow up with the archaeological stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But
Have the
reason archaeological stuff is important is because it tells the story of how the narrative has shifted within the last 7, 8, 9 years. How dramatically everything changed.
And how many sources? How many sources of there still could be an undiscovered source of human. I don't want to say I like the Denisovan cave, but maybe like earlier ancestors that we haven't really found that were sources of early human development.
That's absolutely correct.
That's just me eyeballing it. This isn't my area of expertise, but that's the first thing I think of. If I were to dedicate the rest of my life to archaeology through anthropology, is I would say the Holy Grail would be finding another, early man. I feel like that's what all anthropological archaeologists, that's their Holy Grail, finding another missing link.
And one of the guys on my website, Dr. Lee Berger, I don't think I have a photo of him, but he's all over page 2.
Okay.
He actually did that not once, but twice.
Interesting.
He's found 2 new species.
I got it pulled up on your screen right now.
We talked about Homo naledi and on the front page of my website.
I pulled up his National Geographic profile, the paleoanthropologist. Yeah. Professor Lee Berger.
If you go to page 1, you'll see his photo. The first find is a fantastic story. Yeah, that's him. He's a guy from Georgia. He just got interested in anthropology, and he took off to South Africa, and he got hired on by one of the universities there. I think it's Witwatersrand or something like that. And one day, him and his son, who was like, I think 9 or 10 years old, they had a big dog, a Labrador. They went out, we're going to go fossil hunting today. And he was kind of condescending to his son, and he said, well, you should look over there and see if you find any human fossils. The kid literally tripped over this big rock, and he turned it over, and there was a few human fossils staring him back in the face. And he yelled for his dad. And his dad said, yeah, right. He came over, and he was utterly amazed.
And this was after finding one already, right? That's the second one? His son tripped over the second one?
That was just discovery of a Homo naledi. The second one, well, they've discovered bones in some caves in South Africa, too, for naledi, and it's a fantastic story. Berger's best friend is John Hawks from University of Wisconsin, and he's got a bunch of PBS specials on YouTube you can bring up, and it's just utterly fascinating stuff. The adventure of it all, the Indiana Jones aspect of it all, and the spelunking and going into caves, and they had to hire like 6 women who were grad students or something that were teensy weensy, like 5 foot. And weighed like 98 pounds, so they could go into these little caverns and extricate all the bones for the naledi specimens. But anyway, so
yeah, I was actually going to get into. You have a couple good quotes here. Maybe just a way to kind of wrap up a little talk of racial realism here. The one that struck me was right at the top of your page 2 is Stefan Molyneux's quote. No race is superior. No race is inferior. They're all just a little bit different. I think that's a good way, because I think some of the things you might have said might have sounded polarizing to certain people, and I think that's one you have it front and center right on your second page to make it clear that your intention is not to hurt anyone's feelings. It's not that's. I think it's insane the fact that we need to discuss that, but it's the reality of the time and society we live in.
Go ahead and read the Stefan Molyneux quote at the very bottom, page 2.
Okay. I'll just read the whole thing. Thinking that one race is superior to another is like saying that the brown bear is superior to the polar bear. The question makes no sense. Each species adapts to its local environment. That does not mean they will flourish as well in each other's environments, though. Canadian libertarian philosopher, YouTube podcaster, Stefan Molyneux. Oh, and he just said that that's a couple months ago. That was December of 2018.
Yeah. What else do you need to know? There's no such thing as superiority.
No.
Superiority in what?
Well, the thing is, I think one of the biggest things missing from any conversations where anyone talks about a superiority or inferiority complex, whether you're going ultra right wing and bragging about racial superiority, or if you're going full left wing and talking about like the Jews being persecuted, I'm just going to two common hyperboles here. And the whole point is you're missing nuance and perspective. It's supremacy in what regard? Running a race? Obviously not. Kenyans got you beat. Is it mathematics? Not necessarily the case. It seems that East Asians are leading the way in mathematics. You know what I mean? It's what do there's so many different ways of measuring supremacy or superiority that you just need to find the right measuring stick.
Exactly. That is precisely it. Let me just jump back to Berger for a second.
Sure.
So the reason why his discoveries are so important is because they happen in South Africa. And we've known for many years that sub-Saharan Africans do have admixture. They don't have Denisovan, they don't have Neanderthal DNA, but they do have something. And we were unable to figure out what it was until very, very recently. And that's why I love watching these lectures from these guys, because they'll slip up. Berger has slipped up. Pabo has slipped up on this as well.
Mm-hmm.
They'll come out and they'll say, you know what? Very strong possibility that the admixture that sub-Saharan Africans have is with Homo naledi, possibly ergaster. And there was some intermixing between the two of them as well. So we're not sure, or maybe a naledi type species. What has happened within the last 6 months to the year, we have discovered through mapping of the genome from the bones that Berger has discovered, is that naledi went ahead and lived up till at least 200,000 years ago. They thought, 5 years ago, they thought, it died off 500,000 years.
Right.
Well, recently we discovered no, they were walking around South Africa at the same time Homo sapiens were walking around South Africa.
Right.
And you know that they interbred.
Right.
So here's the problem.
Which means the just to tie in basic anthropology is the longer a species has, the shorter amount of time since it's supposed to have been died off, it means there's more possibility that their genetics is still in our genetics.
Yes.
I just want to put that back in layman's terms because I understand what you're saying, but I want to take a step back and just, provide what that means. So if we think they died off sooner, they're less relevant to our genetics.
We know that, almost positive, that Homo naledi, this ancient hominid species, had sex with Homo sapiens, us, maybe 150, 200,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We know that now. Did not know that a year ago.
Wow.
Why is this important? Why all these anthropologists don't want this to get out? Why is Eric Dondero on a mission to spread this far and wide and tell everybody about this, what these anthropologists do not want you to know?
Why is that?
And you can catch them up during the Q&A, and you catch them saying, yeah, it's probably admixture with Homo naledi, could be ergaster.
Okay.
It's because they were a small-brained hominid species.
I see.
Very primitive. I guess this is not a good way to describe it, but extremely low IQ. You can imagine why sub-Saharan Africans do not want to be associated. Our Europeans right now, look at the popularity of 23andMe. Everybody's getting a test for their ancestry, wanting, what's my Neanderthal percentage? Well, can you imagine 3 or 4 years from now, sub-Saharan Africans getting a 23andMe genetic test and finding out that they've got about 3, 4, 5% Homo naledi
Yeah.
like Asians have Denisovans, and
Well,
you know, you can imagine.
and I go to extremes here, and obviously when that starts becoming the case, and you know, we're not very far away from what I gather on like gene therapy and the idea of possible eugenics. Eugenics is a very dirty, polarizing word, but it's like if you know that certain people are you know, have more naledi in them, and you know for a fact that they're going to be lower IQ. That's not to say, obviously, I'd like to go on the spiritual side of things, that they're obviously good people and they still have a soul and everything. But it's like if you can prevent a part of the population from having that naledi genetics expressed, and if that's the desire of the you know,
Michael, that stop. That is so controversial. What you
I know,
just
I don't
said.
care.
Do you realize how controversial what you just said is?
It's very. But the thing is, it's if the progenitors, you know, if the people, you know, who are creating. Oh, how about this way? You know, let's not even say it's for normal human usage, but the people with the means, okay, the people who are in boardrooms and have the means with which to do this. If I were them, I wouldn't. You know, I would make sure that the best of the human genetic sequence is being expressed in my progeny. You know what I mean? It's like if you could find the naledi parts, isolate them, and if it's truly proven that you're across the board, you're seeing lower IQ or maybe a propensity for a particular illness, wouldn't you want to eliminate that?
Yeah, I know this is highly anecdotal,
Right.
but a few weeks ago, I was in a border town here in Texas, and I had an occasion to meet this Catholic nun, and she had this very dark-skinned young black guy with her,
Mm-hmm.
and he spoke no English,
Mm-hmm.
and she's introduced herself, and we started talking. I don't know what we were talking about originally, you know, but and he was just standing there,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, oh, and she said, well, he's from the Congo. He just arrived, and I knew what that meant. He arrived illegally, and the Catholic compound sanctuary down there is giving him room and board, and you know, as they do with a lot of elite.
Yeah, they're taking care of them.
Yeah. So I thought to myself, the Congo, I bet you he speaks French.
Mm.
Now, nobody spoke to him since he'd been there. And probably when he was in Mexico, nobody could speak to him.
Right.
Because all he speaks is French. So I said, excuse-moi, monsieur, vous parlez français? He lit up. Like he was,
I believe it. The first French.
It was the first French speaker he'd met since, you know, he was walking through the desert in northern Mexico with all these crazy Hondurans and Guatemalan elite players.
Arriba, abajo.
He crawled through a fence. He crawled through the fence and met up, jumped in a van to get to this Catholic sanctuary, and I won't tell you where, but
yeah, no worries. Texas is a big state.
Big town, Texas, and he hasn't been able to talk to anybody. So I started conversing with him, and the nun was sitting there just ecstatic. She was awesome. So happy. She was like, yes, please find out everything you can with him. And I'll tell you what, his French was awful. And he couldn't, I mean, the guy was not very smart. I hate to say that, but he was, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, you know, so, you know, I'm looking at him, and he just wasn't all there. And, you know, and he had just come from the Congo, and it is the first person from the Congo I've ever met in my life.
Right.
And if he's any representation, I know that's highly controversial.
Well, yeah, you can't. That's. I mean, any scientist would tell you that's just. There's probably a term for it, but that's just one person case study. That's dangerous to get into. You know.
But how many Congolese people do we Americans have a chance to meet? We meet a lot of Nigerians. We meet a lot of Somalians, but we don't ever have a chance to meet somebody from deep Central America, Central Africa, like Uganda or
Rwanda. Yeah.
So you know, it just confirmed to me, with everything I know about sub-Saharan Africans and IQ levels, it just really confirmed to me right in my face. Oh my God! It was.
Well, it didn't confirm to you. It was another confirmation.
It was another confirmation.
I've got a friend of mine. He's very scientific, and I like to jump to conclusions as well. And he's always reminding me of the proper terminology from the scientific perspective. You can't say you had it confirmed. You were just confirmed again. That's it. Because science is never ending. You're either confirming or denying.
So that's pretty much it. I mean, people need to understand that race realism has absolutely nothing to do with racism. It's the exact polar opposite. A race realist would want maximum diversity for the entire human species.
Boy.
A racist, and I know racists. Richard Spencer is pretty much a racist. It is crazy. He's a nice guy. He's very polite. I watch his interviews on YouTube and stuff like that, and you cannot believe this guy is a racist, but he actually is. If you they do not like people from other ethnic groups. They just dislike them. They don't want to be around them, and that's fine. I don't care if you're a racist. Just keep it out of my face,
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes us compatible as far as conversation goes is it sounds like both of us are pretty open-minded. There's not too many things someone could say to me that would really throw me for a loop. You know what I mean? I assume, given your experience, you're probably in a similar boat.
Yeah. I actually met a real live card-carrying Nazi one time in Montana. It's a great story. I want to tell you the story. But,
go for it.
Well, I mean...
Because the only other thing I wanted to get into is I want to talk about Venezuela a little bit. That was the last point. Me being born in Venezuela, this being kind of that was the only other thing I wanted to get into here. So maybe you tell a story. I'll pull up a couple articles here on Venezuela, and you can tell your Nazi story.
I was, and I'm Jewish. Okay, so
right.
Let's get that on the record. So I was in Butte, Montana, doing politics. It was 2006, and I was doing some petitioning, and I happened to be in front of this store, and this nice, gentlemanly young guy, blonde hair, kind of tall, came up. I said, "Sure, I'll sign your." I think it was an anti-tax initiative, spending control, something like that. And he signed the petitions, and we got to talking, and he seemed very polite. And he asked me about the issues, and all of a sudden, this crazy dude, short dude, came up and started screaming at him, screaming in his face, calling him a Nazi and all shit, like, "You're a fucking Nazi," But I'm like, looking, I'm standing back and saying, "What the hell's going on here?" Finally, the guy screaming, I shoot him away. I said, "Dude, man, that's totally uncalled for. Just leave me alone, go away." So I turned to the guy after the other guy left, and he said, "Well, actually, I am a Nazi." And I'm like, "Oh my God." He was hilarious. A card-carrying Nazi.
But it sounded like he was a pretty civil guy to talk to, though.
Yeah, well, this is the funny thing. He had managed to wiggle his way onto the ballot for state representative on the Republican ballot, and they had no idea who he was. He just showed up to a meeting, and they were trying to recruit candidates. He looked like a nice guy. He was very polite. "Okay, District 27, we don't have anybody running. Do you want to be our candidate?" "Sure." And he filled out all the paperwork. He filed with the local elections office, and he's the Republican. Well, needless to say, as soon as the statewide media and Helena found out, did a data search on this guy, that the Republican Party in Montana had a genuine Nazi on the ballot in Butte, Montana for state legislature, all hell broke loose. It was in the papers for weeks and weeks. And I actually met the guy. And he was extremely polite and very nice. I told him I was Jewish. He didn't give a shit. But I figured I'd take the opportunity to pick his brain a little bit. And I quizzed him on all the issues. Turns out he was basically a moderate Democrat. Except for the race issue.
Though. Nazis are supposed to be right wing. How can he be a Democrat if he's a Nazi?
Everything he was he was not for free trade. He's for fair trade. He didn't really like free market economics. He believed in some sort of social welfare system, and Social Security. He wanted to preserve Social Security. Right down the list. Basically, he ended up being a moderate Democrat, and until you got on the issue of race. I finally said to him, dude, man, you don't want to round up all the black guys and black women and Americans and ship them back to Africa, do you? I looked him straight in the face and said, no, but we could send them all to Atlanta. I was floored. And it was consistent, his position. I mean, he wanted the Northwest to be all white and maybe Georgia and Alabama to be all black. And so that's my little story about the meeting a Nazi.
Well,
so I've finally
while you did that.
So they're more separate.
Right.
And if you listen to Richard Spencer, he's kind of like that too. He doesn't really despise black people. He doesn't really hate Jewish people.
I believe he's just a segregationist, really, from what I've heard him talk. That's all.
They're separatists. So the people that we call not neo-Nazis today, you'd be hard-pressed to find a real live neo-Nazi who wants to... I think one
of the funniest things is this Nazi that the left is so afraid of doesn't really seem to exist from what I've seen.
They did in the 60s.
They're a bit of a boogeyman nowadays. Not to say that there aren't right-wing extremists. There's a difference. I do believe in right-wing extremists, but I don't think that the typical Nazi, this racist skinhead that might have existed more in the 90s, doesn't necessarily exist like it does 20 years later. In the form that
they did.
I was just going to say.
Back in the 60s, there was that George Lincoln Rockwell guy. I think he was a genuine Nazi. I mean, they existed in the 60s and the 70s in Skokie, Illinois, and all that good stuff. But they really don't exist today. I mean, Richard Spencer is probably the most famous quote-unquote neo-Nazi in the United States, and he's really not. I mean, if you listen to him, he's just a separatist.
That's it.
He doesn't want to kill Jews. He doesn't want to, I'm not excusing him at all. I vehemently disagree with him, but he's not nearly what the left paints him out to be. All
right. Well, I was looking at some things as far as Venezuela goes, and there's one thing that struck me. If you take a look at it on the screen, this is a screenshot of Secretary of Defense Bolton, or is he Secretary of State Bolton?
Yeah.
This is his journal, and you can see it pretty clearly says 5,000 troops to Colombia. That was one of the things I caught. But I was just going down the list here as far as some of the top stuff on the Venezuela topic. I'm going to list a few things off and just kind of want your take on what you've heard so far. One of the first things, Bloomberg reported 43 minutes ago, Venezuela has 20 tons of gold ready to ship. Destination unknown. I don't know if this is something worth...
Now, I heard that they blocked... Maduro tried to get $1.5 billion worth of gold from the banks in New York City, and I think the Trump administration or the bankers blocked him or something.
Yeah.
I saw that.
It says the Russian Boeing 777 that had landed in Caracas the day before was there to spirit away 20 tons of gold from the vaults of the country's central bank. The claim set off a welter of social media speculation and outrage. When asked how he knew this, Guerra, a Venezuelan lawmaker, Jose Guerra, was the one who dropped the bombshell on Twitter on Tuesday, which is today. So this is new news. The claim set off a welter of social media speculation and outrage, asked how Guerra, a former head of research at the bank, provided no evidence, saying he had heard it from former colleagues. Just another outlandish comment from a lawmaker trying to draw attention to the plight of the crisis-torn Venezuela? Perhaps not. Since last month, central bankers have set aside 20 tons of gold for loading, according to a person with direct knowledge of the matter. Worth about $840 million, the gold represents about 20% of the bank's holdings of the metal in Venezuela, the person said. With strongman Nicolas Maduro losing control of the country's already scant finances and reserves thanks to U.S. sanctions, who can put his hands on the nation's estimated 200 tons of gold at home and abroad has become a key question. The nation owes billions to its patrons, Russia and China, as well as bondholders, and also needs hard currency to buy food for its starving people. Venezuela has been trying for years to increase its gold reserves by encouraging mining, putting the military in charge of vast territories that yield the precious metal. State gold processor, blah, 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 blah. From what it seems is this is becoming more, as of today, less of a freedom battle. This looks like this could be a bit of a turf war for the almost another Cold War situation here, because it looks like the Venezuelans have a lot of dealings with Russia and China. That's obvious. We've known that. But it looks like they owe them money, and they're looking to pay off their debt by removing gold that belongs to the country from the centralized bank. How's
Pero
that?
estoy confundido.
Confundido?
¿Quién está en carga ahora? Yeah, ¿quién está en carga? Who's in charge right now? Is it Gaida or is it Maduro?
Well, here's the thing: they're in a state of flux right now, because Maduro still, from everything I've heard, he still has control of the military. Guaido, he's got the support of the people. He's the opposition party leader, is what his official news title would be. But here's the thing: is
Él está en los Estados Unidos ahora, ¿sí? No, where's Maduro ahora? Where is he right now? Wasn't he visiting here somewhere? Los Angeles or something?
Is he? No. Maduro. Let me look. Let me just search Maduro. But one of the other details I just come across was the fact that Guaido, according to the Supreme Court of Venezuela, was recently barred. His financial assets were frozen, and he's not allowed to leave the country. So that's as of the last hour. That's new news. That's news. Maduro seems to be blocking access to Venezuela's social media when Guaido makes speeches. I'm just reading articles here, but I don't see anything in particular as far as where he is geographically. I would assume Maduro is somewhere in Venezuela. I don't think he's left the country. Did you hear something that he had?
I thought I saw a report that he was somewhere.
I'll be honest with you, man.
And I thought, wow.
I think he's a week or two away from getting Gaddafi'd. I do.
Well, you know, something happened early this morning that I caught on Twitter. And it happened here in Houston, actually. The consulate here in Houston, the director of the consulate, a woman, produced this video and it was all in Spanish, of course, and I was one of the few people to understand it when it first came out. And I thought to myself, oh, my God, she's saying she pledged her support to Guaido. And
oh, yeah, I saw you tweeted that.
You saw I tweeted that.
I saw you tweeted that.
I thought, wow, this woman has her finger in the air. She knows which way the wind's blowing.
Yeah, well, the Americans have already legitimized the Guaido regime. I don't know if you'd heard that.
Yeah, but if there was a counter revolution and all of a sudden Maduro got back in full power again, this woman in Houston, she'd be up shit creek without a paddle. So she must know something that his days, Maduro's days are over for her to go ahead and do that. And I wonder what the other consulates are doing.
Let's take a step back from the speculation as far as regime change might go, but let's maybe speculate more about the geopolitical climate, because given your background, I'd like your take on things. I'm going to throw a couple things out there, and I'd like you to maybe tell me what you think. This is just kind of riffing, so I'm not going to hold, this is just opinion stuff. One thing in particular that I've heard is that this is going to create a refugee crisis worse than the Syrian one. It's either going to be loss of life, or you're going to have a lot of migrants fleeing the country, because it's not going to be sustainable for a little while in Venezuela. So I think most people are going to try to leave more than try to stay. What do you think about that? As far as the
It's already happened.
migrant crisis,
Colombia's getting inundated with refugees.
I've heard somewhere in the 5 million people are expecting about 5 million migrants.
Yeah, I mean they had news stories where these women with college degrees who are nurses and everything are now on the street corners in these Colombian border towns hooking and selling themselves for just a piece of bread, you know. So it's already happened.
Nothing like necessity.
You saw that. So
yeah,
I don't know if they'll come here.
Well, that's one thing that's been discussed. Another thing is what would you say should be the level of involvement the United States should have?
Well, I think I agree with Jack Posobiec in this. Just stay out. Just offer support to Guaido and his incoming administration, but I don't think troops are necessary.
Yeah, solely diplomatic support.
Yeah. I mean, if it gets really bad where people are being executed on the streets, then we have to maybe reconsider.
Well, yeah, I'm saying given the current circumstances, yeah, I'm not going to hold you to it if things dramatically change. I just mean, given what we know now, I agree with you. I think diplomatic support is where we should be. Sanctions on the Maduro regime and do everything we can to legitimize and use our State Department resources to help restructure a new democracy there.
Yeah. So okay, I sort of kind of got to get off now. So
okay, that's cool. I just kind of want to touch base on Venezuela. So, Eric, it's always a pleasure, and we'll shoot for doing another one next Monday.
Yeah.
All right.
Monday we'll the topic. So, all right, take care, man.
All right, take it easy, Eric.
All right, bye.